I've found these free newsletters and podcasts over many years, and some of them are still very underrated. I use these to get inspired and build my technical knowledge for free. And if you are building a brand for a company, or you work in marketing, or you have your own business, then you will definitely love this list too. Let's start with the newsletters. The first is Roger Martin's weekly newsletter on business strategy. Fun fact, I was a brand manager at P&G, and some of the core strategies that P&G uses to build its multi-million-dollar brands was actually created by Roger Martin. So these strategies that he talks about in his newsletter, I have personally seen put in practice very successfully. Also, he's very qualified to talk about business strategy because he worked as a management consultant for more than 10 years. And then he was the dean at Rotman School of Business for, again, more than 10 years. And in 2017, he was also named the #1 management thinker in the world. So this is one newsletter that never goes unread in my inbox. The next newsletter is a great mix of beautiful aesthetics and very useful content, and it's Pretty Little Marketer, or PLM. Sophie Miller, who runs this newsletter, shares a weekly recap of TikTok videos and Instagram ads that caught her attention and that she found interesting. More interestingly, she also does a roundup of any news or any new features that are being rolled out in all the different social media platforms. So again, if you work in marketing, this is one that you'll definitely want to subscribe to. The next newsletter is all about e-commerce, and it's called Go to Millions. It comes out 2 to 3 times a week, and it's basically a brain dump of all the interesting e-commerce brands that Ari, the founder, comes across. Sometimes it's just random screenshots, and other times it's like in-depth articles about what the e-commerce brands are doing, from their website to the product lines to the supply chain and the marketing, and what is really working for that brand that other brands can learn from. And it just feels like an old college friend or a school friend is sending you their brain dump of all the interesting snippets that they come across. Another newsletter in the same direct-to-consumer niche is Growth Notes. This is a monthly newsletter that again goes really deep into one topic or one brand and analyzes the growth and the trends. I really liked their newsletter from September 2024 about how Ritual.com became a $50 million a year brand. I recommend you go to the archive and check it out. Up next, here's one that really stands out for its fresh perspective, and it's the newsletter by Hyper Studios. This one reads almost like a magazine, and it has a lot of content on brand design and product trends. Sometimes they also have short interviews with designers, creative directors, and founders. They also do these little observations about ongoing trends. Like recently they had one about how a lot of brands are currently very inspired by rock climbing and are using rock climbing imagery in their brands. I thought that was really interesting. The next 3 newsletters are by 3 different publications in brand and marketing, so I'm grouping them together. These are the newsletters by Marketing Week, Ad Age, and Retail Dive. Each of these is a curation of all the products, news, trends, and businesses related to the name. The best part of these newsletters is that if you're not part of the paid subscription for the digital or print magazine, then these newsletters are the next best thing because they send out some of the top stories from the magazines, but for free. Sometimes they send out these consumer reports and studies for free. So it'll just be a report on like something interesting about a trend or about a product or about an industry, and you just get it straight in your inbox without having to pay for it. And also this is something that you really wouldn't find on the internet for free otherwise. And you never know, like sometimes you don't even know that you're interested in something until it comes into your inbox, and it can be a report that can really help you in your work or in your business. The second last newsletter is Strategy for Life by Sweathead. This has not been very consistently active for a few months now, but it's so good that I'm still including it. This is focused on strategy in advertising and brand building. The content is super unique and it never feels like a copy-paste from somewhere else, so it's very high quality and very original. It's also packed with a lot of stuff, but it's never overwhelming. So even though the newsletter is not very active right now, you can still find a lot of the content on their website and Instagram. Finally, a newsletter that I absolutely love is Seth's blog by Seth Godin. Just in case you don't know who Seth is, you should definitely look him up. And he's the writer of many books on marketing and business. On Seth's blog, he publishes a blog post every single day and sometimes even twice a day. And he's been doing so since 2002. So there are more than 9,000 posts on his blog by now. Sometimes it's literally one line and sometimes it's a couple of paragraphs. And the theme of his blog is usually around business, marketing, personal development, and leadership, and sometimes even general anecdotal life advice. I have a couple of calls right now, but I will continue this later today and tell you all about my favorite podcasts. So see you in just a bit. Now let's move on to the podcast list. First, very popular, Diary of a CEO. I saw Steven live in a conference earlier this year, and I have to say that he is just as charismatic and well-spoken in person as he is in his videos, which is an amazing quality for a good podcast host. Topics in this podcast vary a lot, but I highly recommend all the episodes with different founders of businesses like these ones. Next, if you want an expert's take on branding, then look no further than The Future by Chris Do. Chris has decades of experience at this point, and he's probably the best content creator right now within the niche of graphic design, marketing, and brand building. There is no fluff in his advice. It's always super practical, actionable, and straight to the point. The next podcast is The Top Entrepreneurs by Nathan Latka, not sure how that's pronounced. This podcast is specifically focused on all the companies that are building software as a service. Building software as your product gives you a lot of unique advantages, like the entire global world is your stage and your market to sell. However, it does come with a lot of unique challenges as well, like data privacy and storage and customer acquisition, and making sure that you develop the best possible features because you are serving but also competing with essentially the whole world. This is a bit niche, but it has some super interesting interviews of the founders of software companies like Zapier, ClickUp, and ConvertKit. And you can find the video version of these podcasts on Nathan's own YouTube channel. The next podcast is fairly new. It just came out, I think, a couple of months ago, but it's already very good, so I'm including it in these recommendations. It is the Product Podcast by The Product School. They interview product managers, founders, and other leaders. Like recently, they did an interview with Robert Bruner, who is the chief designer of the Beats by Dre headphones. He talks about his philosophy and approach to good product design. It's a very interesting episode. I highly recommend it. Number 5 is the podcast Masters of Scale. As the name implies, this is a podcast with interviews of extremely successful business owners who have managed to build businesses that have an impact on a global scale. The founder of this podcast is Reid Hoffman, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn. So he has access to very influential business personalities like Mark Zuckerberg, Stephen Colbert, Jessica Alba. It's a very wide list of very high-profile guests that he interviews in this podcast. Another podcast that is similar in theme is How I Built This. If I had to choose between Masters of Scale and How I Built This, I would personally pick How I Built This because it's not necessarily famous personalities that are being interviewed, but rather just everyday founders who started from scratch and built very successful businesses. So the frequency of episodes is a lot more, and also I think it's just more achievable and more motivating to listen to someone talk about how they built a business that makes a few $100,000 or a few million in revenue versus listening to Mark Zuckerberg talk about how he built Facebook, which is worth, I think, like trillions at this point. So How I Built This has a really fresh perspective with interviews of founders that maybe you wouldn't otherwise see in the news. The second last podcast is Business Wars. This has a really unique structure. So there are about almost 100 seasons now, and in each season there are about 4 to 6 episodes, and they dive in really deep into the business rivalry of the two major players within that industry. For example, all of these. So this is one of those podcasts where you don't have to listen to every single season, but if there's an industry that you are interested in, then you can just listen to the season for that industry. And they go in really deep. So they explore not only the what, but also the why and the how, and all of the history and the timeline and where they stand today. Finally, the last podcast recommendation is Online Marketing Made Easy. This is for beginners in marketing, and specifically online marketing. So Amy Porterfield, the host, does a lot of episodes on all kinds of topics, like how to build your very first website, or how SEO works, or how to make a digital course, and so on. That's it for my list of newsletters and podcasts that I personally love to follow. And I would really love to hear your recommendations in the comments as well, because I'm sure there are still so many more newsletters and podcasts that I probably don't know about. If you stay till the end and enjoyed this video, then I have another video about my favorite books for brand and marketing managers, which I think you will probably enjoy as well. So I'll link that somewhere here on the screen and you can watch that next. That's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.